So we're here with Mike Armano, who was one of the Democratic candidates for state senate here in the
Second Essex and
Middlesex
Middlesex.
District. And appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. If you could tell us a little bit about your background for folks who don't know you personally. I know you're a Dracut resident here in town, but a little bit about your background and what made you decide to run for office.
Yeah, sure. So I live here in Dracut. I've lived here for 2 years. My wife, Jill Asimakopoulos, now Jill Armano, grew up here in Dracut, and 2 years ago we lived in Tewksbury. So Jill had a house there for 8 years, and we lived there for a while. In fact, my in-laws, who were in the town of Dracut, followed us to Tewksbury, and then we ended up coming back to Dracut. Before I lived in Tewksbury, I grew up in the city of Lawrence, so I lived there for most of my life. Went to school at Central Catholic High School, and went to school at UMass Lowell and Mass School of Law. I did go to law school and complete that, and I was practicing as an attorney for a few years, passed the Mass, New Hampshire, and Maine bar exams, did a little real estate law, some things with small business. And when I was in law school, I took the civil service exam to become a firefighter. My father was a firefighter in Lawrence for 32 years, and his father was a police officer in Lawrence until he retired. So I was intrigued with public service in the city of Lawrence, and it took about 8 years to get on to the fire department, and I practiced law a little while, and when I got that call to be a firefighter, I joined the Lawrence Fire Department. So that was about 8 years ago. So I first got interested in running for office when I joined the union, the local 146 Lawrence Firefighters Union. And in that union, when I first joined, I thought that all unions were about grievances and contracts, and didn't quite understand it. But when I joined, a captain, Perry DiNatale, said, "Come with me to the state meetings, come see what unions are about on a state level." So I did that with him. I became a delegate to our local 146, to the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, and I learned that firefighters had a lot of legislative priorities. And while I was part of those meetings, every month I would go, I heard great speakers come in and come out, and political leaders and community leaders. One of those leaders for us was a retired firefighter. His name is Ken Donnelly, and Ken Donnelly was a state senator out of the Lexington, Woburn area. And as a retired firefighter and now a leader, a political leader and an advocate for the people, I became intrigued with what he was about. And he wasn't just about firefighter issues and firefighter priorities, but he was really about the issues that affect all of us day in and day out. He was an advocate for teachers and nurses and veterans and students and children and elderly. All those things mattered to Ken. So when I saw that, I had of course I have a legal background, and I thought maybe someday I'd like to run for office. And Ken was a person that I wanted to kind of know more about. Unfortunately, last year, a little over a year ago, Ken passed away from brain cancer.
Right.
A disease that kind of plagues the fire service. So when Ken passed away, I was heartbroken about it, because we lost a great leader. At the same time, our state senator, Barbara L'Italian, had decided she was going to move on and run for Congress,
Right.
which would leave an empty seat in the state Senate. And there's been a lot of in and out in the state Senate. And right around that same time, I was sitting in a conference, and I heard one of the New Hampshire firefighter leaders, the president of their state union, talk about how they had an initiative to get firefighters to run for state office. And specifically, they wanted to get 40 firefighters to run for state office, and they ended up getting 26 to run and 14 elected. And they did that because they wanted to fight right-to-work initiatives that were coming into New Hampshire, all tied in with the recent Janus case in the U.S. Supreme Court. And they wanted to make sure that labor was strong, and people understood the importance of organized labor and working people coming together to bargain for their rights. So when I heard that, and when Ken passed away in the open seat with Barbara leaving, I had long conversations with my wife, several of them, And I said, with my education, my background, I have a Juris Doctorate degree, I practiced law, I have a master's degree in public administration. I feel like the time is now. This is the time where I can't sit back anymore. I want to do something for the public. I want to make sure that this state Senate seat is filled by somebody who understands the community. The district was very unique, with Lawrence being the place that I grew up, and Tewksbury being a place that I spent some time in, and now I live in Dragut. I'll probably be here for the rest of my life. And funny enough, both myself and my wife both went to law school in Andover, and we spent many events in that community. So it was almost as if the state Senate district in the 2nd Essex and Middlesex was tailored for me. So I said, you know what, the time is right. I think it felt more like a calling, that same calling that I felt when I was called to the fire department.
It is unique that you've got connections to all of the communities within the district, that you've spent time, significant time in all of them, having lived in 3 of them, and like you say, gone to school in the 4th, and so that definitely gives you a unique perspective for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things as a firefighter that I'm sure that you guys deal with on a day-to-day basis has been the growing opioid epidemic. In terms of what you see the state doing, what the state can do, what's your take on what you would like to see done on the state level to help combat this, because there are people dying every day.
Yeah, I think this is a problem in Lawrence. Lawrence happens to be, I believe they were ranked number 1 with opioid deaths in New England, based on the area and based on the population. So it's certainly a problem we see in the city, but it's also a problem that we see in Andover and Tewksbury and Dragut, all parts of this district. I have people right on my street in Dragut that suffer from addiction, people that have overdosed right in their driveway, neighbors of mine. And it's a sad reality, but it affects all of us. So something certainly needs to be done, and I think it's a problem that needs many solutions. There's not just one easy answer, and it has to do with, of course, getting resources for things like rehabilitation and making sure that when somebody enters into a program that they can stay there for the time that they need to get that help. There's so much talk about different things like having a safe location where addicts can use their drugs, and there's a lot of controversy involved in that, and I don't know if that's a solution, but certainly getting these people help. On the fire department, I'm an arson investigator, that's one of my roles, and we've had witnesses who have been people suffering from addiction that are homeless. We have a large homeless population. We deal with these people every day. I've personally driven homeless people as witnesses to court hearings, and in the car ride down to Salem, Mass, you have long conversations, and they talk to you about what they're suffering with and how they want to get out, and they're trapped for one reason or another. Maybe they started taking a drug when they were a high school athlete, or maybe they had some other social and psychological issues that led them to use drugs as an escape. But I guess the story seems to be the same. They're not happy with their life. Of course, they're homeless, they're suffering from addiction, and they want help. Some of them have talked about how they can get into a program. Others don't have the courage or that motivation, whatever it is, to get into the program. So it's a combination of reaching out to people, talking to these people, helping them see the opportunities to get into a program, and making sure that they stay in that program and they get the services they need.
Over the years, and I'm sure you've witnessed this from a distance, there have been a series of leadership issues on Beacon Hill. The Senate President recently stepped down. There have been issues with speakers of the House and whatnot. It seems like a challenge for any new state senator, a new representative, to make good judgments in terms of who they support, make good judgments in terms of who they align themselves with. what type of, I guess, how do you see yourself fitting in to the Beacon Hill environment so that you can be effective but not get caught up in, some of these unfortunate incidents?
Right. And some of them were bad judgment calls, if you want to put that lightly. But as far as working with people in the State House, I think at the end of the day, your values have to be aligned with the people that you represent. And you're never going to agree fully with one particular person in the State House, your colleagues that you'll be working with, but you have to have an open mind. You have to hear their perspective. They have to understand your perspective. You have to reach out to the community and know all walks of life in the community that you represent, and you have to take those stories and perspectives and the real stories, the real ways that people live, not just theories, but take the real stories to the State House and tell them, this is how the people in my district are living, this is why this is important, this is why this is less important. I think if you do that and you stick with aligning your values with the values of the community, as opposed to aligning yourself with one other politician in particular. It's not about just creating a friendship and being loyal to one cause just because someone believes in that one cause. You have to take every situation as it comes and understand how that relates to your district. And you can't be combative. You can't be an extremist one way or another.
Right.
There has to be a neutral ground. There has to be some sort of compromise.
Right. When it comes to this particular district, it is structured in such a way that you've got Lawrence, which has tended to be more of a Democratic stronghold, more of a liberal stronghold. You've got three of the suburban towns, which have tended to be more conservative over the years. It seems as though you've got, the city and the suburbs have got a little different priorities and whatnot. As a state senator, how would you go about balancing those priorities? Because you're going to hear different things from the city council of Lawrence, talking to you in one ear, the boards of selectmen in these smaller towns talking to you in the other ear. How do you balance those priorities?
Yeah, that's a great question, a question that I'm asked often. And, I have the advantage of having a lot of experience in these communities. In the city of Lawrence, I'm there every day. I've been involved a long time in the community. One of my hobbies and one thing that I did was I coached high school wrestling at Central Catholic for over 15 years, and I met a lot of people from the Merrimack Valley, from Lawrence and Tewksbury and Andover and Dragut and other communities. And I had the advantage of living in Tewksbury for a little while. My in-laws and brother-in-law are there now. I now live in Dragut. I spent time in law school in Andover and participated in different activities in Andover, like the road races in the Clown Town, and gone to restaurants. And we do the same thing. We eat breakfast in Tewksbury. We go to lunch in Dragut. We're in these communities. Me and my wife and my family, we participate. I'm in the city every day. I know what goes on. And there's a lot of issues, although the priorities may appear different, there's a lot of similarities throughout these communities, like the opioid crisis, again, something that affects all the community. Things like crime. I do arson investigations. I've had people in Dragut who have come into Lawrence to set a car on fire. There's a lot of communication throughout these communities. We have highways that connect us. We have businesses that do business with each other and people that travel into these communities to do business within. Are there differences? Yes, there certainly are. And there may be Republican priorities and Democrat priorities. But again, I think it comes down to compromise. You have to understand what those priorities are, what they mean to each specific community. You have to get down and get into those communities, talk to the people in the community. And you have to have a strong but neutral voice for the people in the community. You have to make sure that you understand what the middle ground is and not just be one side or the other. You can't be too conservative and you can't be too liberal.
As a first-time candidate, while you have lived in some of these communities and worked in some of these communities, there's probably a lot of people who really don't know Mike Armano. They don't know who you are. What if people were to ask your friends or your wife about, you know, who you are, what type of a person you are, what do you think people would say about you? What type of individual are you?
I'm quite confident that the people that I surround myself could attest that I am a man of values. I work hard. I've always worked hard. You know, when I got out of law school, I wanted to start my own law practice. In an effort to do that, I worked a third shift doing security. I was exhausted. It was horrible, but I did it because I was driven and I wanted to start my own law practice. I took 3 bar exams. I wanted to pass a bar exam in Mass, New Hampshire, in Maine, and I did that, and I did that on the first try. I taught paralegals at night because I was interested in giving back to the community and working with in adult education, and education is one of my passions. I continued with my commitment to coach wrestling because I worked, and one of the reasons I wanted my own practice is so I could continue working with the kids in the high schools and do that type of thing. So I've been very dedicated to my community. When I joined the fire department, again, that same drive, working hard. I joined the union immediately, became a delegate to our state. I became an EMT, although we don't have EMTs in Lawrence. I wanted to get that certification for extra education. I got my master's degree in public administration. I got several certifications like chief officer and arson investigator and fire prevention and public educator, so I could get out into the community and use those credentials. On another level, some people say, but you haven't been a politician, you've never run for state office, can you do this? Although I'm not a politician, I think that's what makes me appealing, but I do have experience in politics. You know, as my role as a fire prevention officer and doing arson investigations, I work in City Hall all the time. Just last night I was before the City Council in Lawrence presenting an ordinance that I drafted in the city. I work with planning and development and zoning. I serve on the Mayor's Distressed Property Task Force. So I've taken my experience as a firefighter and my legal background and my drive to work in the community, and I've sort of shaped that to where I want to go.
So far running, and we've still got a ways to go, still several weeks before the primary, but where this is your first time running, has it been, has your experience been as you anticipated, or has there been some surprises? Have you learned some things along the way?
I'd say for the most part it's been a great experience. You know, we started off, me, my wife, and some of the team members on the campaign going to events, and mostly me and my wife. The first 3 months I had asked the chief for a leave of absence from doing investigations, so I would have nights, weeknights, and weekends free, and we went to over 100 events in the community. And not being a politician, I didn't know a lot of the political leaders, but we reached out to everybody. We went to all these events and met leaders, community leaders, elected officials, people in the community. We got great feedback. We told them what the campaign was about, what I was about, and the feedback was tremendous. We've shifted gears and done a lot of door knocking now. And you know, and with anything in the beginning, I haven't really knocked on doors before. It was new to me. And you meet some people that, you know, they don't want to talk. You're bothering them. They're eating dinner, and they might say, "Okay, thanks," and you have a 10-second conversation with them. But for the most part, the doors that we've knocked on where people are willing to talk, they've been very receptive. They're excited about having just an average Merrimack Valley guy run for office. It's something that I believe they want, and the feedback has been great. And it's exhausting. You know, when we ran this campaign, we said, especially me and my wife, we didn't want to leave anything on the table. We wanted to give it everything we have. There's been a lot of organizations and communities and residents that have bought into this campaign, and we want to serve them, and we want to give this campaign justice. You know, people volunteer for the campaign. A lot of people have taken time away from their family because they believe in having a public servant in public office. And you know, when other people join the campaign and they work hard, you don't want to let them down. And we haven't done that. And it's been great to have positive feedback. We did some polling that was very positive, and things are looking great. It's going to be a dogfight to the end, we're sure, but we signed up for it. We're willing to do that, and with everybody behind us and feeling the same way, we're going to continue to work hard. But all in all, we're absolutely exhausted, and we're proud of it. but we're very, very, very pleased with the experience so far.
Excellent. And just to let people know, if they want to find out more information about you, about the campaign, how can they go about that?
They can go on our website, armano4senate.com. They could also email me or the campaign at armano4senate@gmail, or feel free to call me anytime. 978-395-0391 is my cell phone number.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate the time, and good luck in the campaign, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk with you more as we go along.
Thank you so much, Bill.